Hello, and welcome to our eclipse full moon forecast. So on the 28th of October, 2023, we are having a Taurus eclipse, and it is also the final eclipse of that particular eclipse season. So for those of you who aren't completely sure how eclipses work, they tend to work in seasons and cycles. So we will have a couple of eclipse seasons, usually a year. This year we had our eclipse season in April, May, and now we're having one now in October. And they usually will work in polarities. So wherever the nodes of the moon are, which look like that is, let me just make this bigger. So that is your north node, and exactly opposite it, this is always how the lunar nodes work. Exactly opposite it, so 24 degrees of Aries and 24 degrees of Libra, you have the south node. And the nodes indicate where it is in that moment that either the sun will be eclipsed by the moon, or the moon will be eclipsed by the earth. So pretty much the solar eclipses happen in the day when the moon comes in front of the sun and the earth is. So if I'm the earth and you're the sun and the moon comes in front. And then, of course, a lunar eclipse is when the earth comes between sun and moon. So the nodes are the sensitive points upon the axis at any given time where eclipses will take place. They move backwards in the sky, these nodal points. And so they have moved just recently, between the last eclipse cycle and this eclipse cycle, they have moved from the signs of Taurus and Scorpio into the signs of Aries and Libra. So the eclipse season will last for about 18 months to 2 years within those two signs, those two poles, polarities. And when we're having a changeover, then sometimes you will see that it's not always a Taurus moon eclipse followed by a Scorpio eclipse, which are opposite each other, as in the case that we've had this year, which has been quite an interesting eclipse season, because earlier in the year we had a Scorpio eclipse ruled by Mars and an Aries eclipse ruled by Mars. They're not opposite each other, and they are both Mars ruled. This eclipse season, we just still coming from the Libra eclipse ruled by Venus, Libra new moon, and we're going into the lunar eclipse in Taurus ruled by Venus. So 2 Venus eclipses now, 2 Martian eclipses earlier in the year. This is a little bit less common, and it's actually quite an interesting eclipse cycle, because there will only be one season in which Aries and Libra will both have an eclipse in that same season, and that'll be the first eclipse season next year, 2024. And then already the nodes are going to begin to get ready to shift, and the eclipses start to become a little disjointed again. So that in itself is quite interesting. But let's bring ourselves back before I get too digressy as I can. So we're here at the final eclipse of the Taurus-Scorpio axis. It is the Taurus eclipse, and it is really closing off a cycle. Where that happens in your chart will indicate whether it is a bigger turning point, because that is what eclipses tend to be. They tend to be these eclipsing moments, these turning point, pivotal things that happen. Very often they happen like this. It's like 1 minute it was this, then it is that. But there are also just as often times where you look back at an eclipse season and you go, oh my word, that is when everything changed for me. But in that moment, you may not have recognized the level to which things change. So some of those things can be like a lightning bolt, and some of them can be, that was the exact point that a seed germinated that took you in a whole different trajectory. But at the point of the seed germinating, you didn't recognize what kind of a tree the seed would grow into. So again, you get to play with it in where it is in your chart. That's another thing I want to mention. Because I've drawn this up for where I live, it will be a Gemini rising chart for me, but that's probably not what it's going to be for you. So don't worry so much where you see, like, you won't want to say, well, this full moon is happening in the 10th house. Probably not for you. what is going to be easier for you to more fully understand and integrate, how to personalize this a little bit more for you, depending on your level of astrology, and always meet yourself where you're at. So if you're like, what is she saying? Just discard that part. But if you're wanting to bring it in a little bit more and your knowledge is getting better in astrology, then take what I'm saying now and use it. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore it and listen to the things that make sense to you. Astrology is very complicated and we'll never know it all, any of us. But wherever you find yourself right now, there are still gems and nuggets to glean from it, but just meet yourself where you're at. So what I wanted to say for those wanting to apply it to their own charts more is look at where is 5 degrees of Taurus and 5 degrees of Scorpio in your chart. So for example, I'm going to find 5 degrees of Taurus in my 9th house. So then I can go say, well, do I have any planets or points around 5 degrees of Taurus or the other fixed signs? And in that, the sign opposite is always the same modality. So fixed, Taurus is fixed earth. Opposite it, we have Scorpio is fixed water. And then squaring that, we will have fixed fire, Leo, and fixed air, Aquarius. So you're just going to take whatever knowledge you have and use what you have and see what you get from it. Never negate your intuition. We are in Scorpio season, and Scorpio is very intuitive and has a knack for the deep dive. So you trust where you're at in your own development now. And a lot of that is not just the book learning and understanding of things, but more the intuitive sensing and feeling, because Taurus is very much about embodied. It's about, and the moon is about embodied, and the moon loves to be in Taurus. So she's in her happy place in Taurus, and she gets to really embody. So any kind of embodied practices, so walking, yoga, breath work, anything that feels very physically fueled, even cooking a really lovely, nourishing meal for you and your family, or taking yourself on some kind of a date on your own or with somebody you love, anything that feels very physically focused, embodied, present. These are going to be very helpful practices to help you to process and integrate this moon. Be aware that the opposite sign is Scorpio, where there is a lot of deep feeling, a lot of deep intensity, a dive, desire to transform. Taurus, however, would really rather not get too icky with it. Taurus prefers to keep things more pleasantly embodied. I want things that taste good, that smell good, that feel good. Scorpio's like got the pleasure pain thing down. Like sometimes I'm going to get more pleasure if I move through the pain. So that's always what happens when you work on a polarity. You get this kind of like this tug of war energy where there's not always an agreement. But in order to balance out Taurus, you could lean into Scorpio, and in order to balance out Scorpio, lean into Taurus. Scorpio might be too deep and intense at times, and sometimes it's just like, hey, not everything has to be deep meaning. Why don't we just stop and smell the roses? You know, so it will, they counterbalance one another. So if you know that you're a very Taurian person, you may need to lean into some Scorpionic tendencies. If you're a very Scorpionic person, it works the other way around. So there is a lot happening in this axis of Scorpio and Taurus for this eclipse as well. And in fact, we have a predominantly earth and water energy abounding. Those are two feminine principles. This is a feminine-led lunation because Venus is one of the feminine principles and she's in charge of this moon. She's also in a place that is not always her easiest, and she was there for the last eclipse as well in Virgo. Let's just make that a bit smaller. That'll be easier. She's in Virgo, which is not really a place that she's comfortable, because Virgo can be very, very pedantic and detail-oriented. And Venus is more like, let's look at the big picture. Let's just attract by being soft and open and, you know, that kind of energy. She doesn't want to really get nitpicky. But I actually personally, and maybe this is because I've got some really strong Virgo stuff in my chart, Saturn in Virgo in my chart, which is a difficult thing in some ways, but has become something I've really learned to value. And so I say, I look at Venus that's a little bit difficult in Virgo, and I can see the value in that. And maybe that's just through my lens because of what I have personally in my chart. But for me, what that's really saying to us is, let's take this opportunity, bearing in mind Venus has just done a huge retrograde process in Leo. There's been a lot of excavation. Now she's moved into this the sign of Virgo, where she has to dig into the details and tick things off her list and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And she can't stop and smell the roses like Taurus wants her to do. And she can't just lean into loving relationship like Libra would like. She has to get focused. She has to get practical. She has to get things done. So although this can be a place where there is maybe a bit of frustration for her because it's not her personality, it's like, think about the things in your life that are not your favorite chores and tasks. And the more you avoid them, the bigger that pile of laundry gets, or the bigger that pile of bookwork gets, or whatever it is for you. And it weighs on you. It's in the background all the time, like, I've got to get up to date with this thing. But then you'll look for any opportunity to avoid that thing. Well, this is kind of the opportunity to recognize that if I do the thing, there's a book, I haven't read it, but I love the saying in it about eat the frogs. In the first thing in the morning, eat those frogs, which basically it's a book, as I understand it, without having read it, that talks about doing your worst things first. Just get those things done. Once they're behind you, you can go on enjoying your day. And that's very Venusian. She wants to just go on and enjoy her day. She wants to be able to dance or sing when the mood strikes her. She wants to be able to visit and be with others. She wants that. But sometimes there are things that we have to get done. And Venus is more about our wants, and the moon, which is being eclipsed in Taurus, is more about our needs. So if the moon is being ruled by Virgo Venus, then we have this dichotomy of like sort of fine-tuning the details of what do I need versus what do I want. And because they're both in earth signs, it's, well, how do I practically get there? Like, if I want to dance whenever the mood strikes me, I need to make sure that I've cleared the floor of all the clutter and the rubbish and given it a sweep, so that I'm not getting grit under my feet as I dance. Taurus does not like uncomfortable feeling things. So you can see that sometimes in order to get the things you want and do the things you want, you have to attend to the things that need to be attended to. So that's, I think, a very important part of this eclipse, where we get the opportunity to get practical with it. And if you have strong earth in your chart, then you might find that even more strongly to be the case. We've had also a lot of like tough fixed energy stuff happening for quite a while now. So for the people that have a lot of fixed sign energy, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you're probably just at this point where you just don't want to anymore. It's that like, I can't even energy anymore. This feels to me like quite, I'm not going to say it's going to be done, but it's a big shift with the nodes and that eclipse cycle just moving on off for a while now. So I think it's important to breathe with some of the fixed challenges that have been showing up for you in the last years. We do have coming up early next year, I think it's early next year, I don't have the dates in top of mind, but we will have Jupiter meeting up with Uranus in the sign of Taurus. It's going to exacerbate. I also just wanted to point out that at the last eclipse, Venus was at 5 degrees of Virgo. Now the lunation is at a 5-degree mark. So that is also pointing out to us that there is something that Venus activated in the first eclipse that is really, and there should always be a bit of a follow through in eclipse season, but I feel like there's a stronger correlation. So think about what you were doing in that Libra eclipse. Think about the themes that came up for you. And remember, that was a South Node eclipse where we really were looking at a lot of relational dynamics and old relational narratives that needed to be kind of let go of and released. And now we're in the space of, well, let me dig in, Taurus, to some really good grounding practices that can help me walk forward with a new way of being in relationships. And let me be methodical, and let me make sure I bring in a pleasurable sensory experience for this. Let me paint the picture, but not just paint the picture. Let me have a very tactile, sensory picture to paint, because that's really where we're moving. So we also have, I mean, you can call this conjunct. It's close enough to say the moon is practically on Jupiter, which makes everything bigger. Remember, Jupiter has this really strong amplifying energy, but Jupiter is also very prophetic and very spiritually based, and he really wants to like expand all of these things, expand your awareness, and he's really lucky and joyful. So he's bringing a lot of that, which, so if we think about Taurus, the sign of Taurus having the sensory experience, it's almost like a sensory explosion. And then, of course, we do have Uranus there, but a little further off from the moon. But Uranus has been in Taurus. We've been eking that one out for some years. So we'll just ignore that for the minute. Not ignore. Let's not upset Uranus or he'll throw a lightning bolt at us. We're not ignoring him, but we're not bringing him in so strongly to this particular eclipse. But then if we come across, remember, Jupiter's at 11. If we come across to Scorpio here, we will notice that Mercury is at 10 degrees of Scorpio and Mars is at 11 degrees of Scorpio. Mercury's catching Mars very quickly at this point, going to meet up with Mars. Exactly. But I mean, already he's in a conjunction with Mars, and already Mars and Mercury are in a conjunction with the Sun. That's 5 degrees off, that's 6 degrees off. We can feel that very strongly. So there's this pile up of Sun, Mercury, Mars, in Scorpio, and Mars rules Scorpio, so Mars is strong here. And then there's a little pile up of Moon and Jupiter, and just off to the side we have the Uranus energy, and just behind that, although this is in a different sign, we have the North Node. So and just behind the Sun we have the South Node. So basically we have this really, it's more than just Sun Moon. So a full moon is always going to be Sun opposite Moon. An eclipse is always going to be like a supercharged kind of bigger, longer acting also energy of Sun and Moon opposite each other. And then if we add the fact that there's actually a pile up in those places, Mercury being with the Sun, I really want to think in a deep and intense way. You can think of Scorpionic energy as being like an investigator, or forensic investigator, like go deep, find all those little bits. And details. Virgo, Venus is also very detail in Virgo. So both Mars and Venus are in a space of deep focus, and they are the ultimate relational dynamic. Venus being the she and Mars being the he energy, or the divine, sacred, masculine, feminine energies. They're both in this like, ooh, I want to eke out the details here. I want to write my lists. I want to tick things off. I want to dive deep. I want to feel it all. I want to take action. I want to do the thing. So there's this really strong dynamic with both the masculine, feminine energies. Remember, that's not about gender, because we have that internally for us, no matter what our gender or our whatever we identify as. So you've got the strong focus of, I need to get this right, because we're making a new story. The way relationships have been working is really shifting, and it's hard for us to know what the new picture is. But this is a space of like drilling down into it with the Scorpio and the Virgo there. But then in the Taurus is saying, but I want it to be yummy. I want it to be delicious. I want it to be expansive. I want it to fuel my soul. I want to travel, even if that is just on a heart level. I want to meet people that just nourish me on every level. And Mercury is saying yes, and I want them to go deep in their minds, and I want them to understand. And Mars is saying, and I'm going to go to those places, and the sun is shining there. So you can see this is beautiful, but possibly also intense. And I think it also very much depends on how hard any of these things are hitting on your chart and what you have already been going through for the entirety of the Scorpio Taurus eclipse season, as we get to this culminating, full stop at the end of the sentence of that process. Bearing in mind that astrology is all about patterns and cycles. Everything comes back around, and you have cycles within cycles within cycles. We're looking in this forecast primarily at the lunation. So it is about the moon and the sun and their relationship, and how their relationship is impacting us on one cycle level. But there are many cycles, there are many rhythms interplaying and mingling with these things. Hence, is not, you know, we're not experiencing this in a vacuum. We can look through that telescope and get that one focal day, let's say, of the eclipse or phase, but recognizing that there are so many different layers involved, and maybe the eclipse is less potent in your chart than one of these other things. So that's why this becomes like a broad forecast of how do I start to work with these things. Saturn is also saying to us, how do I get structure in the new dream, Pisces? How do I action that out and build a gentle flowing, because that's also a very feminine energy. Pisces brings in a lot of that feminine connection and collective consciousness. But how do I make this thing that is like an entire ocean, how do I turn it into a structure? And you might think of a beautiful shell that has like a nautilus, which has that beautiful Fibonacci type sequence, and see there this balance of how to see structure in flow and dream. Look for it in nature. In the southern hemisphere, we're experiencing spring, so all these new flowers, the structure in a flower. If you're in autumn, you're going through your own sort of thing, harvesting. Look at it in the structures, like cutting an apple in half through the sort of midsection. And seeing the apple star. Look at those patterns. These are Venusian things as well, because Venus flowers and shapes, like apple is a Venus fruit. I'm not even sure why these are coming through for me now. This is just channeling through. But start to go out and look in nature. Where is there beauty and structure and rhythm and flow? A lot of divine feminine energy. There's a robin outside stealing a dog pellet from my dog's bowl. Find beauty in nature, even when nature's finding a quick and easy meal. So I think it's very important that we really harness the divine feminine energy. We are trying to balance relationships, but I feel like maybe because we've been in a patriarchal paradigm for so many years now, that for us to rebalance it, we need to first really dive into the sacred feminine and say, well, how do we do that? Because even as women, we don't really know how to do that. We haven't been taught how to do that in a whole way, in a holistic way. It's more been like the feminine is the vulnerable or the weaker or the one that must be silenced, or all of the difficult, complicated things that have been the feminine paradigm, so that women coming into their power have actually become more masculine in order to succeed in a place of power. And Pluto being very involved in being square the nodes and being involved in the sky a lot in the last while, and still is trying to get us to look at our relationship with power. And there is a way to be a more masculine dominant power or a more feminine dominant power. And I don't think we really understand. I certainly don't feel like I understand what it is to be an empowered, fully empowered feminine. If we were to take the masculine out, because we're so conditioned to see the power in the masculine ways. Again, not about your gender. So even if you are a woman, you probably, when you're at your strongest, feel more masculine on. So you tap into the masculine strength. What is feminine strength? Maybe these are the kinds of questions we need to ask ourselves here. I mean, how do I get what I want, which is a Mars thing? We all have Mars in our chart. How do I get what I want, masculine, in a more feminine way? Venus is more of an attractor. She draws to her what she wants, rather than Mars goes and gets what he wants. Neither one of these things is good or bad. It's just a different modus operandi. And I think that's a place that's going to be quite important for us to play within now. I don't even think I'm going to speak into much else other than that. I feel like the strongest focus right now is the Taurus Scorpio energy, and real focus on Venus being in Virgo and how she is controlling the narrative, being that she's ruling the moon in this eclipse. And then the follow through of energy from the Libra eclipse, which was also Venus ruled, and Venus was also in Virgo at that point. And then a little bit with the Saturn, a little feeling into the Saturn. Venus is also in a wide opposition to Neptune in Pisces, which is also about the dream, the ideal, the new vision. So, but we can't just get all like Pisces expansive. We actually have to pull it down and we have to embody it and we have to do the details. So, and actually, I don't know why we're jumping ahead so much, because I mentioned the first eclipse season of next year being the one and only one that's going to be purely Libra Aries, which is interesting. But what I'm suddenly jumping to is that the following eclipse season brings in our first of the Pisces eclipses, which will be later next year. And what's interesting about that is we're speaking strongly into the Virgo, in the Venus in Virgo energy, and what's opposite that is Pisces. And that will be where the eclipse cycle moves to next. So we're moving out of Taurus Scorpio into Aries Libra, and then by the time we get to late next year, we're starting the transition to move into Virgo and Pisces, where again, a lot of what is coming up now is going to reinforce things like, oh my goodness, there's a donkey. I don't know if you can hear that on the phone. There's a donkey braying in the background. The town that I live is well known for donkeys wandering the streets. Anyway, so I feel like we're speaking a lot into the end of Taurus Scorpio. We're kind of getting into this cardinal Aries Libra energy, and we're also getting a glimpse into going deeper into the ideal, the collective Pisces, with all the practical details that because Virgo and Pisces is very healing axis. So it will be a space of healing some of the wounds of the patriarchy, healing some of the wounds of old relational dynamics and belief systems. But the cardinal energy that the nodes are in right now, fiery Aries and airy Libra, is cardinal, meaning initiatory. So it's very much saying we've just done some deep fixating on things, and now we're going to burst into this new, what's the difference of me being a sovereign person in my and authentic and in myself, strong in myself, to be in a good relationship with another. I need to have the me, Aries, in order to be healthy we. So I'm not a codependent person, but rather an interdependent person within my relationships. And that's going to be then healed. There'll be a level of healing that comes through when we move axis again into Pisces, Virgo down the line. And I think this is also a little bit of a showing us of how there is this divine plan, there is this master plan, there is this corrective quality that happens as we go through things. They feel in the moment often like they're almost insurmountable, but when we look back, we can see, oh, well, that happened so that I could get to this point, so that I could get to that point, so that I could learn that lesson, so that I could see that thing. And that's kind of what you see in astrology. There's always these next layers, and you're going through something because it's priming you for the next thing. And for me, in some ways, it's kind of just like a permission slip to not resist, because it's exactly what we need. And also what we resist persists. So instead of resisting, we try to flow through it and grow through it. Okay, that has gotten rather long, so I'm going to stop the share. I hope that has been helpful for you. I wish you so much love and support for this eclipse, the second and final eclipse of the season. I am available. Check out the link below this video for personal readings for those who are interested. I'll never try to get in touch with you, but if you want to get in touch with me, you can find the links below. Thank you so much for your time and have a beautiful eclipse.